Honest to God, honest to God, I thought I was going to cry when the decision was to come down, but I was in too good a mood. I was watching a documentary on Turner Classic Movies on the Dean Martin show. So I was in too good a mood. But I knew it was going to happen either today or tomorrow. And wouldn't you know, I had scheduled a dental appointment for today, so that's good. So I knew if it happened today, that's good. If I scheduled the dental appointment, because then I would get the decision today, so, most certainly. And of course, I could have had it tomorrow, and and thinking that well, I'll be clear if the Supreme Court decides today. But I thought maybe the Supreme Court would want to decide, lay all this down on Friday, right, and then just dump it on the weekend. But no, I guess they were big about it. They said, we're going to do it on a Thursday. Yeah, Emil, that's good. You get your dental appointment so you can have all the Novocaine, all the lidocaine you need, all the painkiller you need for this decision. Because it is a momentous decision. People are calling it a watershed decision because in the history of how this government, this country deals with race, this is a milestone. And it is always believed in the general sense of quote unquote affirmative action in the use of race to first make up for indiscretions. How do you call slavery an indiscretion, right? I mean, to make up for past historical deficiencies in equality. That sounds like a euphemism. But at some point in the 60s and 70s, it changed from we're going to make up and try to repair some of those things, and we're going to go for a sense of diversity. And at that point, in the late 60s, early 70s, when they switched that framework of affirmative action to it's now about diversity and inclusion, many observers are saying that's where you put a time frame, or you gave people who are against affirmative action a sense of hope that at some point we're not going to need this anymore. And how many people brought up Sandra Day O'Connor, Judge Sandra Day O'Connor's quote back in 2003 in the Grutter decision, where she said, at some point, I would like to see a day where there would be no need for affirmative action. And the Grutter ruling on affirmative action meant things were going to be narrowly tailored, and any kind of affirmative action would have to survive strict scrutiny. At least we had the tool to use this concept of affirmative action to try to remedy all our past historical ills when it came to race. And that's the way it was until today, when 6-3 was the decision, and it was conservatives versus the liberals, 6-3 on the University of North Carolina case, 6-2 on the Harvard case, because Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson had to recuse herself because of her Harvard connections. And so with that, Judge Roberts, I mean, if Judge Roberts went to Harvard, maybe he could have recused himself. Maybe if all the elite Harvard judges recused themselves, maybe we'd have like maybe 4 or 5 judges who could vote. That would have been interesting. But Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson recused herself. So her vote on the Harvard side was 6-2, 6-3 on the University of North Carolina side. Affirmative action is over. I frankly thought I was going to cry when a friend asked me about this a couple weeks ago. I said, it's going to be like the Dobbs decision when abortion was reversed. In that case, 50 years of law. In this case, 40 years of precedent, 40 years of law. I thought I was going to cry. I said, but like I said, I didn't cry. And I'd scheduled my dental appointment, so I was loaded up with lidocaine. I had painkiller. The predominant feeling I had was anger. The predominant feeling I had was the fight continues. It's not over. The fight continues. So I wasn't depressed. I was disappointed because the court had so many different ways that it could go. You will recall the lower court said there was no discrimination at Harvard. The lower court affirmed affirmative action. The higher court could have kicked it back and said, yeah, there's some problems with Harvard, so fix your ruling, but we're not going to rule overall on affirmative action. They could have done that. They could have done any number of things, but they went all the way and they said race-based admissions is unconstitutional based on the 14th Amendment, based on the, on equal rights clause. And I've read over the decisions. I've read over most of what Thomas said. And he goes further than Roberts. What Roberts said was, he said you can't use race in admissions, but in an essay, if a student wants to say something in an essay, you can. And Justice Sotomayor was highly quotable when she said, that's like putting lipstick on a pig. I had problems with that, animal rights person that I am. But I didn't know exactly, this is a pig in a decision. And to say, you can use race in an essay, yeah, that's like putting lipstick on the pig. You're a pig of a decision. I get that now. It's something to say you could use it in an essay. And I think what we're going to say, and this is sort of my conclusion, the court has said the government will not allow you to use race in any kind of application for college admissions. But they'll allow you to talk about it in an essay form. So I think the sign from Justice Roberts to all of us is, and it's my takeaway, I'm going to talk about race. From here on, it's race, race, race all the time. I'm talking about race. I'm going to talk about it more now. I thought at some point, to talk about race or to see things from a racial lens, maybe we've gone beyond that. But no, this is a signal that game on. Talk race. And like Justice Roberts said, write your essay. Tell your story. It's all about race from here on. And I think for college admissions, it's going to be tricky. They all want to comply. You heard the new Harvard president, Claudine Gay, say, we're going to comply. Our values aren't going to change, which is assuring. But it's going to be a little dance. How it's going to be, I'm talking about race, but I'm not talking about race. What did the 6 justices think would happen. You say you can't use race, okay, but you can talk about race. So we're going to see a deluge of admissions essays and applications for people who are going to turn the admissions process into the race court of America. You want to find out how race has harmed my chances or how it has affected my life? You're going to hear about that. And the justices pretty much said, okay, college admissions, you figure it out. Here's the law. Can't use race anymore. But notice no one's talking about being colorblind. No one's, I didn't hear that much in the reporting. And even when I read the opinion, it didn't really get into colorblind. We're going to be colorblind. I did get into this idea that we're going to be race indifferent. I mean, that was a line that I plucked out of Clarence Thomas's his remarks, his opinion. And he goes further than even Roberts. And he even cites, the Asian American, he buys into the Asian American victimhood thing. Thomas cites the internment camps. Look at all the race things that the Asians have been through. We can't subject them to more discrimination just because we have this thing about slavery. I mean, he really buys into what the Students for Fair Admissions, what they attempted to do all along, which is pit one race against the other, right? What you saw today was the successful use and the most cynical use of race to defeat affirmative action. And it's sickening because a lot of people say, that's the right way. What the Supreme Court's doing is the right way. No. And if you've been following, look, affirmative action has been like I've lived through it. It's been all throughout my life, right? I was 8 years old, right? Civil Rights Act, 65, 64, 65, voting rights. I mean, all of that. I've come of age as America tried to figure out race. And of course, I'm nowhere as an Asian American, right? I'm not in the black-white equation. In fact, it wasn't until the Immigration Act that many more Asian Americans came in. Being a Filipino American, my family was in because they were colonized and then became naturalized. But the vast number of Asian Americans don't come in until late 60s, early 70s. So while people are trying to figure out this race thing in America, Asian Americans were nowhere. They weren't even considered. And that's kind of the irony that Asian Americans are now, they've now been used by Ed Blum, all the anti-affirmative action, anti-civil rights activists who have made a career of turning back things like the Civil Rights Act, turning back affirmative action. And wouldn't you know, because they are true to their methods, they have won this case, but it makes sure that attorneys will be employed from this day forward to argue what exactly this means for everyone. So, in some ways, I'm very angry at what happened here. And in some ways, it's just more of the process of American life as we try to come to some kind of conclusion. There never is a settled sense of law, although I thought we had come to a settled sense of law the last time we fought at the Supreme Court for affirmative action. I'm talking about the UT Fisher case, right? Same people were involved. Ed Blum, instead of using Asians, he had Abigail Fisher, white student, UT, and UT with their holistic approach won. And I thought that was it. We're not going to see this again. We are home free, right? Home clear. But Ed Blum had one more fight in him, and he said, I'm going to use Asians this time. Damn it. He did. He trolled the internet. He found Asians who were aggrieved. He had them form Students for Fair Admissions. Although he was fronting them, it was the anti-affirmative action whites in yellow face. And they did it. It took them a while. They had the aggrieved from Harvard. They had UNC, University of North Carolina. So you had an elite college. You had an elite public school. And they fought and they lost. They lost in Boston at that trial, the Harvard trial. But they knew as long as they had the court, the high court, as long as they had those numbers, they couldn't lose. So what can you say except, the old saw, I guess it's kind of old, but I mean, maybe 15, 20 years. Elections have consequences. Here we are. The court was manipulated. The design of the court. That's how you get the 6-3. For the last month, I was thinking, maybe we can have a different configuration of the court. Not 6-3. Maybe we saw 5-4, 8-1. We saw all sorts of different numbers on different cases, like on voting rights. These last couple weeks, I thought maybe the court isn't all that bad. Not all that conservative. Maybe they'll choose to look at this case a little differently. But they didn't. I mean, it's still ambiguous in the sense that Judge Roberts and the 6 conservatives don't necessarily overturn the Grutter decision or Fisher. They don't deter the old precedents that date back 40 years or more. They don't turn that back. They don't say that that's bad law. But they say you can't use race in college admissions. But you can say race in an essay. So my takeaway is talk about race. We're going to talk about race. It's going to be race. I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to keep talking about it because we can't let them win this turn where we become race indifferent. Race still matters. There's still racism today. And when we go race indifferent or colorblind or race unconscious, we're trying to say, hey, there's no racism. There's no racism if we can't see race. But maybe the perps would cop that attitude. But for people who are people of color, we know there's racism. We know racism exists. So, race. We got to talk about race. We got to talk about it all the time. It's the only way we're going to overcome. So, see this moment, June 29th, is the moment that our race consciousness has been raised. We're talking about it. We got to talk about it. That's what they're giving us, because they're not giving us much. Unless we speak out and talk about it, it doesn't exist. They don't want it to exist. They don't want to give us boxes to check. They don't want us to say anything. They want us to think it doesn't exist, but we know it exists. So actually, Judge Sotomayor may have said letting applicants talk about race in essays may be like putting lipstick on a pig. Yeah, a little bit, because it is a pig of a decision that the justices came down with. But that opening, we must take advantage of. They say someone who's disadvantaged can talk about race. Someone can talk about their race and want to talk about their family, talk about their heritage. We're not going to make you invisible that way. Okay, great. Then we're going to turn it on and talk about race all the time. All the time. Race, 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 race. It matters. It matters. It matters. So, yeah, I didn't have as much. I went to the dentist today. I went to the dentist yesterday too. That's why I didn't come on live, because I was too Novocained up, and my right cheek just felt like a lump of muscle. I had to come over, couldn't talk, and the painkiller was helpful because it just sort of helped me kind of get ready for today a little bit. And then today I had less painkiller because there's the other side, but it was just enough. And then it was a temporary. But I was still watching everything and reading. I've got Sotomayor's thing here. Oh, I got to drop down here to get my glasses. I really am in a closet. You see that? Sonia Sotomayor. Really a great, this is from her opinion. Second page. Today, this court stands in the way and rolls back decades of precedent and momentous progress. It holds that race can no longer be used in a limited way in college admissions to achieve such critical benefits. In so holding, the court cements a superficial rule of colorblindness as a constitutional principle in an endemically segregated society where race has always mattered and continues to matter. Always matters and continues to matter. The court subverts the constitutional guarantee of equal protection by further entrenching racial inequality in education, the very foundation of our democratic government and pluralistic society. Because the court's opinion is not grounded in law or fact and contravenes the vision of equality embodied in the 14th Amendment, I dissent. Equal educational opportunity is a prerequisite to achieving racial equality in our nation, she says. The fight for equal educational opportunity, however, was a key driver. Literacy was an instrument of resistance and liberation. So she goes into a lot of history here, in her opinion. But so the passion is there, but I think what a lot of people miss out on is they miss out on how the fact that the Harvard case was they used Asians. And Sotomayor does not she says, there is no question that the Asian American community continues to struggle against potent and dehumanizing stereotypes in our society. It is precisely because racial discrimination persists in our society, however, that the use of race in college admissions to achieve racially diverse classes is critical to improving cross-racial understanding and breaking down racial stereotypes. Indeed, the record shows that some Asian American applicants are actually advantaged by Harvard's use of race. And eliminating consideration of race would significantly disadvantage at least some Asian American applicants. So just in case you think that, oh, well, didn't the Asian Americans, didn't they bring up this case against Harvard? And so the Asian Americans must be happy, right? They won. No, we didn't win. Asian Americans are not happy. I can tell that from Asian American applicants, the Asian American rejected, and Asian American alums. Race-conscious holistic admissions that contextualize the racial identity of each individual allow Asian American applicants who would be less likely to be admitted without a comprehensive understanding of their background to explain the value of their unique background, heritage, and perspective. Because the Asian American community is not a monolith, race-conscious, holistic admissions allow colleges and universities to consider the vast differences within that community. And this, mind you, is from the ALDEF brief, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. It was mentioned a number of times in Sotomayor's opinion, and proud to be associated with ALDEF. I write for their website, and the ALDEF brief, the ALDEF amicus brief, quoted in Sotomayor's dissent. Harvard's application files show that race-conscious holistic admissions allow Harvard to value the diversity of Asian Americans' applicants' experiences. Moreover, the admission rules of Asian Americans at institutions with race-conscious admissions policies, including at Harvard, have been steadily increasing for decades. So that's a good thing, right? But by contrast, Asian American enrollment declined at elite universities that are prohibited by state law from considering race. And ALDEF mentions the UC Berkeley situation. At bottom, race-conscious admissions benefit all students, including racial minorities. That includes the Asian American community. And that was a direct rebuttal to Justice Thomas, who in his affirming opinion said, look at these poor Asian Americans, they've lived this history of being interned, the Chinese workers, the immigrants, they shouldn't have to undergo this. Completely misreading the situation for Asian Americans today. I mean, it's the fact that there are more Asian Americans who get into Harvard is because, I don't know, greater emphasis on college, parents pushing them, but that doesn't mean that's all of them. There are a number of Asian American kids who race-conscious admissions have helped them show an admissions officer that we're not all the same. We're diverse. The Asian American community, not a monolith. I think people are kind of just discovering that. But if one takeaway that you have from today is that, oh, Asian Americans won. No, Asian Americans did not win. They didn't. Some did. The big winners, whites who are against affirmative action because they used Asian Americans to cynically end the use of race in college admissions. And you say, okay, Emil, this is just college. Don't kid yourself. College now, industry, other areas of society next. Public entities will be affected more immediately. People that use, or industries that use, public dollars, but don't think that private industry will not follow suit, and that some of these principles will impact HR offices throughout the land. They'll be thinking, okay, this is the guidance. How do we make this work for us? Don't kid yourself. It's coming. This is why it's a watershed moment. This is why you got to pay attention to it. And like I said, you see all the different opinions. I'm concentrating on Sotomayor because I think she's the most eloquent. So let me finish here's the last pages of her opinion. Today's decision further entrenches racial inequality by making these pipelines to leadership roles less diverse. A college degree, particularly from an elite institution, carries with it the benefit of powerful networks and the opportunity for socioeconomic mobility. Admission to college is therefore often the entry ticket to top jobs in workplaces where important decisions are made. The overwhelming majority of members of Congress have a college degree. So do most business leaders. Indeed, many state and local leaders in North Carolina attended college in the UNC system. The court ignores the dangerous consequences of an America where its leadership does not reflect the diversity of the people. This is a key point, because you might have heard this in some of the reporting, where justices were saying, why does this have to go to racial balancing? And it doesn't speak to the idea of quotas which are illegal, but the idea of why do we need, why do entities have to look like America? Why do we need a racial balancing? And here, Sotomayor, in her opinion, addresses that. She says, a system of government that visibly lacks a path to leadership open to every race cannot withstand scrutiny in the eyes of the citizenry. Gross disparity in representation leads the public to wonder whether they can ever belong in our nation's institutions, including this one. And I guess she means the Supreme Court, and whether those institutions work for them. Oh, by the way, there are no Asian Americans on the Supreme Court. Oh, you know that, right? There aren't. I brought it up a number of times. She continues. The court is going to hear from 27 advocates in this sitting of the oral. She's citing an oral argument. Okay. By ending race-conscious college admissions, this court closes the door of opportunity that the court's precedents help open to young students of every race. It creates a leadership pipeline that is less diverse than our increasingly diverse society, reserving positions of influence, affluence, and prestige in America for a predominantly white pool of college graduates. At its core, today's decision exacerbates segregation and diminishes the inclusivity of our nation's institutions in service of superficial neutrality that promotes indifference to equality and ignores the reality of race. Now that kind of says it, right? Today's decision exacerbates segregation. Yeah. You like that old segregation of the 40s and 50s? Hey, it's coming back. It diminishes the inclusivity of our nation's institutions in service. What are we in service to? In service of superficial neutrality. Oh, you mean colorblindness? Yeah. Superficial neutrality that promotes indifference. Oh, I'm really indifferent to race. It means that I'm kind of less aggressively racist. I'm passively aggressive racist. I'm neutral. I'm indifferent. I'm indifferent to inequality. Yeah. And as Sotomayor puts it, it ignores the reality of race. The reality of race, which says, just because you let one Emil Guillermo into Harvard doesn't mean that, the Filipinos in the Mission District are all thriving, or in the South of Market are all thriving. I mean, when you talk about representation, it leads to notions of tokenism. Who wants that? But if you really want equality, you can't ignore race, lest you wallow in this sense of, well, we're indifferent, we're colorblind. Is that the way? Is that better? Home stretch for Sotomayor. True equality of educational opportunity in racially diverse schools is an essential component of the fabric of our democratic society. It is an interest of the highest order and a foundational requirement for the promotion of equal protection under the law. Brown v. Board of Education, recognized that passive race neutrality was inadequate to achieve the constitutional guarantee of racial equality in a nation where the effects of segregation persist. In a society where race continues to matter, there is no constitutional requirement that institutions attempting to remedy their legacies of racial exclusion must operate with a blindfold. There, see, you don't see anyone who is for the decision talk about colorblind and blind, but Sotomayor is hammering it hard in her dissent. Let's call it what it is, right? The six want to see it as just, we just want equal protection under the law, and a constitution that does not see race, but in the opinion of Sotomayor, the dissent, you see what colorblind really means and how this colorblind notion is inadequate. In a society where race continues to matter, there is no constitutional requirement that institutions attempting to remedy their legacies of racial exclusion must operate with a blindfold. And now there's going to be a blindfold put on everyone. Today, this court overrules decades of precedent and imposes a superficial rule of race blindness on the nation. The devastating impact of this decision cannot be overstated. The majority's vision of race neutrality will entrench racial segregation in higher education because racial inequality will persist so long as it is ignored. How else, or what else could happen? If you're going to ignore it, it's going to persist. Sotomayor scores a point. And here's her final paragraph. Notwithstanding this court's actions, however, society's progress toward equality cannot be permanently halted. Diversity is now a fundamental American value, housed in our varied and multicultural American community that only continues to grow. The portrait of racial diversity will go on. Although the court has stripped out almost all uses of race in college admissions, universities can and should continue to use all available tools to meet society's needs for diversity in education. Despite the court's unjustified exercise of power, unjustified exercise of power. The opinion today will serve only to highlight the court's own impotence, the court's own impotence in the face of an America whose cries for equality resound. As has been the case before in the history of American democracy, quote, the arc of the moral universe will bend toward racial justice despite the court's efforts today to impede its progress. Martin Luther King, Our God is Marching On, from March 25th, 1965. That is how the opinion of Justice Sotomayor ends. It is the dissent that will mark this day for all people of color who believe that a great injustice was done on this day, June 29th, 2023, when the High Court pretty much without overturning prior law, the Grutter case in 2003, or the Fisher case in 2012, I believe, or Bakke in the 60s and 70s, which still holds that, you can't have quotas, can't have racial quotas, but it said race was allowed. I guess in a sense they did overturn that, didn't they? Because now they say you can't use race, not narrowly, except in essay form, which is why I said earlier today, I didn't get mad. I didn't cry a tear. I got ready to fight, because the fight that I thought was over after all my years, after having received a form of affirmative action when I got into Harvard in 1973. I mean, there was, how could I have gotten into Harvard if they did not think race mattered? Think my father, a colonized Filipino who came in the 20s, who couldn't have a family for nearly 30 years because of discriminatory practices and anti-intermarriage laws. How could they not think that race played a role in my life? And yet, I still managed to get decent grades and decent test scores, and was really charming. I mean, I think what we're going to see is we're going to have to see universities redefine merit. What else? I mean, really, what else is there? We have standards, high standards. And our high standards, I think you could still say we have values. We believe in diversity. We don't see race. But we're not indifferent to the human condition. We are not indifferent to what people have overcome. It's exactly the same thing that they told me when I asked them point blank in the 70s, hey, did you let me in because of affirmative action? And they said, no, Emil, it wasn't affirmative action. You're a pretty bright guy, and we want you on our campus. I said, will you tell that to everyone else here? They didn't, of course. I mean, I got other complaints about affirmative action. It's not always a two-way street. They let you in, but they don't, it's not exactly a full embrace. And that's what I've learned after 50 years of affirmative action. But that all ends now, right? It ends tomorrow. What they call it, who knows what they call it? They don't call it affirmative action. I think it would be best if they don't call it affirmative action. if they call it, but whatever. I mean, Justice Thomas calls it race indifference. He avoided the colorblind phrase. That has always been the phrase of people who are anti-affirmative action. Oh, let's be colorblind. That was the phrase used in 1995 during the Prop 209 Civil Rights Initiative, for lack of a better term, that defeated affirmative action in California. But it is a kind of race indifference now. People want to be indifferent to race, but really it's and I always questioned this about colorblindness. I said, you want to be colorblind, you're really talking about race ignorance. Is that what you want in society? I wrote a column early on this month, and I just said, I never liked the term colorblind because I just didn't like it. Because how do you address the problem if you can't see it? You go into a major surgery and you put a blindfold on your surgeon. Is that going to make the patient well? I don't think so. And, I was hoping that they would have other kind of prescription, but they offer nothing except don't use race, except let the kids apply and use it in their essay. So it's really going to be up to people to be creative and imaginative about how they sneak in other things. Like maybe they'll say, you can talk about your circumstances, but don't talk about your ethnicity. Then it's almost like speaking in code. So every school is going to be different, and it's going to be where I bet you it's going to be just like abortion. You live in Georgia, but Georgia doesn't allow for abortion, so you have to go to a neighboring state. It's going to be like, you want affirmative action, but the school you want doesn't believe in that, so you only apply to affirmative action schools. Maybe it'll come down to this school believes in diversity. Wink, wink. Show me your essay. I mean, I have to say, one thing that Sotomayor did mention is that every place that has a positive race experience, mention race, holistic part of the entire student, they see the population of underrepresented minorities grow. In places that are restrictive, like California, generally those numbers are down. And so really, without an affirmative action, what you're left with is a kind of acceptable form of racism to protect a dwindling number of whites in America. And, I was looking at the numbers. The U.S. population by race and ethnicity, overall, we're about 350 million people. 250 million or so are white, up 19% since 2000. Up 251 million white, 63.7 million Hispanic, 45.4 million Black, 21 million Asian, 1 million two or more races, 4.4 million American Indian, 8.78 thousand Native Hawaiian. But you look at that and you say, wow, 251 million whites. That's still the majority. Well, no, it's not the majority. It's a minority, but we're a country of minorities, right? Well, actually 251 million, and it's growing. It's still majority white. Some states are minority majority, like California, like Texas, handful of others. But, you know, the census, this is all census figures taken, reported by Axios. Census is tricky because of how they count Hispanics. So you do Hispanic any race, you're talking about 63.7 million. They grew by 31%, or by 80%, 80.3%. The fastest growing is Asian. 104% is the rate of change from 2000. 21 million. That's just straight Asian. You count all the other permutations and we get to about 23, 24 million. But 21 million compared to 251 million whites, we're still in the minority. And so, yeah, in Texas, Hispanic residents now officially make up the largest share of the state's population. The new population figures show Hispanic Texans made up 40.2% of the state last summer, barely edging out non-Hispanic white Texans, according to the Texas Tribune. So the demographics of America, still predominantly white, but it's still a move toward a kind of race preservation. They don't want to see any more Asians. They don't want to see any more Latinos. They don't want to see any more blacks. So it's just, I think another takeaway from all this, if you listen to all the coverage and you just check the history, there was a point where affirmative action was seen as, we are going to make amends for what has been done to our African American community. And then to make it more broad, it moved from a kind of reparations mindset to diversity. And at that point, it almost sealed the deal that sometime in the future, someone would bring up the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause and say, hey, what about me? And now we're seeing a kind of evolution from white supremacy to white preservation as the numbers dwindle for whites, and you're seeing anti-civil rights, anti-affirmative action advocates like Ed Blum out there, you know, trying to fight this affirmative. He's fought affirmative action all his life. He failed miserably with the Fisher case in Texas, 2012, I believe. But he won this time because he realized in that case he couldn't win with a white victim. He needed an Asian American victim. And he got that Asian American victim or victims with the Students for Fair Admissions. The oddly named Students for Fair Admissions, which has worked to undo more fair admissions in the university and colleges of the United States. Well, okay. All right. So I got some stuff off my chest. I didn't cry. I thought I would shed a little tear for affirmative action, but no, it just got me riled up and angry, and it should get you riled up and angry too. But angry enough to tell your story. Tell your story. They won't let you put it down in an application, but they'll read your essay. Tell your story. All right, so that's going to do it for us today. The Novocaine is worn off totally now. No painkiller. But I'm going to read I did read Thomas's, and I laughed a little bit when he tried to make the case for Asian Americans. Oh, these poor Asian Americans. I like this about Clarence Thomas, right? Recipient of affirmative action. And this is how he views the program that took him out of Piney Point. He views it with a level of disdain that is kind of, well, I guess it's indicative of a guy who takes a $500 million vacation paid for by the billionaire Republican Harlan Crow, I guess. You know, it reminds you of Ramsey Lewis's quote about affirmative action. Take the elevator up, but don't forget to send it back down. Clarence Thomas got up there and he's cutting the ropes, cutting the cable, sending it down. Watch out below. Racial indifference, Clarence Thomas likes to say. That's my quote from Thomas from today that'll stick with it. We're in this era of racial indifference. I will stick with Sotomayor's assessment of the Supreme Court opinion that essentially is a pig of a decision. And even if you allow applicants to write about their race in an essay, that's like putting lipstick on a pig, which kind of unfair to the pigs, I think. Okay, I don't like, I still like Sotomayor's dissenting opinion, but maybe I'd like to be kinder to the pigs, as I am kind to all members of the BIPOC community. Hey, that's going to do it for our show today. I knew it was going to be like this. I said if I go to my dentist, it's going to happen today. I went to my dentist, it happened today. But at least I got the lidocaine. I got the lidocaine. So I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling anything now. I'm not painless. We're here Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific Live. We do this old-fashioned style talk show. You know, what does an Asian American think about SCOTUS? I hope you heard it. Use your finger on Twitter, rewind it. On YouTube, rewind it. I'll put a post of this on amok.com tomorrow. I'll write my ALDEF column on the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund. I'll let you know what I really think. In the meantime, God, times like this, meditation helps. A little deep breathing. I like to read the meditations of Marianne Williamson. I don't know if I'm going to vote for her, but if I meditate with her, it's I have to say this, that by meditation, my anger is, it isn't softened a bit, but I want to see the good side of Roberts and Thomas and Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Alito and Coney Barrett, because bottom line is we're on the same team, right? We have different opinions, but we're on the same team. And I would like them to think that I too am on their team and a countryman and a believer in democracy. So no matter what, no matter how different our opinions are, you have to believe that we can overcome. You got to. If you believe in America. Heaven help us, right? All right, so a little loving kindness meditation helps right now. Show it for others, it comes back twofold. Starts with a little prayer. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Until next time. Back at 2 o'clock Pacific. We'll talk more about this. Till then, Mahal Kita.